example, we like to try to educate our clients with respect to some of the best practices for human resources. And here indeed you can see the four types of best practices in terms of an overarching description. All right, I'm going to talk about what's on my best practices slide, and that includes knowledge of and compliance with the laws that govern your workplace. Some additional best practices include developing consistent and compliant policies and practices and basically consistently applying them, including well-trained supervisors and managers, and then engaging in regular human resources audits that cover legal compliance issues. In essence, today's discussion is going to focus on the very first prong of that list of best practices, and that is knowledge about and compliance with laws that govern your workplace. But first, do you remember this time last year? You'll recall that President Obama had been in office for less than 1 month. The nation was experiencing massive job cuts, mortgage foreclosures, bankruptcy filings, and this time last year, I'm afraid I just got a pop-up saying I am no longer a presenter. Is that true?
You're still talking. I've got this slide up now.
Can the audience hear me?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, audience, I'm so sorry about these difficulties, but I'll continue. Here we are on the slide we're supposed to be on. That's great. Remember this time last year. At this time last year, we were also recalling one of Bill Clinton's most famous campaign slogans, and that is, "It's the economy, stupid." That certainly helped to get Mr. Obama elected. It gave him tremendous goodwill as he assumed the office of the presidency. And so where are we this year? Well, I'll give you a big old same place, more damage, sadly. And that's where we're going to be for a while, but we are told that there is hope. So when we look at more of the same in 2010, no matter what letter shape our economic recovery is, I've heard that it's an L for Europe, and a U for the United States, and a V for China. It's anyone's guess, really. No matter what our economic recovery looks like, it's going to take time, and we believe that the employment and jobs sector will continue to lag behind. We probably will not have a full recovery in the employment and jobs sector because too much damage has been done already. Too many jobs have been, in quotes, shed. That's the word we've been hearing and seeing in the media, and the word shed I always find reminiscent of someone shedding their skin. It just is a little offensive to me as a human resources practitioner. But again, we're told that there is hope. There is some light on the horizon. Inventories are way down. Orders are picking up. Needs are being placed on the front burner, and that's good for jobs. It's good for employers. It's good for everything. People, however, are still looking for change. And change we're seeing, of course, we're going to have some new elections, and we see Scott Brown coming in, and we think that's going to have a major impact on the ability to pass some of the labor-friendly laws and some of the other employee-friendly laws, but I'll get to that in a few moments. In essence, we're looking at 2009, 2010, and beyond, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what impact the new administration has had on labor and employment so far, and where we think it's going to go. But for the most part, these four bullets are my primary perspectives. It's a greater focus on employee protections and benefits. We're seeing either new or reinterpreted labor and employment laws, a tremendous amount of increased regulatory activity, and the enforcement activity, it hasn't gone through the roof yet, but it's going to. Trust me on that one. Remember that Mr. Obama is a champion of both working and non-working Americans, and his first piece of legislation was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, along with several employee-friendly executive orders that apply to government contractors. We expect that all of the above will continue for the length of Mr. Obama's presidency, whether that's 4 years, 8 years, what have you. Let me give you the 2009 update, and then we'll talk about the 2010 forecast. So in essence, here's an overview of what we'll talk about for 2009. And for the most part, let's look at the Supreme Court cases very, very briefly. I've only chosen 4 to highlight for you. The first one is the reverse discrimination case named Ritchie versus DiStefano. And that case arose when the city of New Haven, Connecticut, refused to certify the results of promotional examinations administered to firefighters because the pool of successful candidates was not sufficiently diverse. This was a paper and pencil exam that was created by a test development company based on extensive research, and it was developed with a specific focus on minority firefighters to ensure that the test results would not unintentionally favor whites, that is, have a disparate impact on minorities. In essence, pursuant to a collective bargaining agreement and pursuant to multiple other factors, the decision was made not to utilize the exam results when it did come time to make promotions. And as a result, the top scorers on the captain exam, who were 7 white individuals and 2 Hispanic applicants, and the lieutenant exam, who were all white, felt that the city had engaged in discrimination against non-minority candidates. As a result, the non-minority firefighters who had qualified for the promotions, including 17 whites and 1 Hispanic, filed suit against the city. They alleged violations of Title VII and the Equal Protection Clause, and they claimed that by rejecting the test results because the applicant pool was not sufficiently diverse, the city had denied to them the opportunity to be awarded promotions for which they were qualified and had discriminated against them in its attempt to avoid possible liability for what is called disparate impact discrimination. So in essence, by attempting to cure one form of race discrimination, the firefighters claimed that the city engaged in another form of race discrimination. They took the cases to court, and the city prevailed in the lower courts. But the Supreme Court overturned those rulings, starting with the premise that the city's refusal to certify the test results because of insufficient minority representation was itself a race-based decision. And that particular decision did violate Title VII. And so in essence, the court established a strong basis in evidence standard and held that an employer may not seek to avoid liability for unintentional discrimination, that is, disparate impact discrimination, by intentionally discriminating against others unless there is a strong basis in evidence of disparate impact liability based on what the employer is attempting to achieve. It's a little bit circular. However, what it tells us is that the concept of reverse discrimination lives, even though my perspective on that is the word reverse is redundant. In essence, discrimination on the basis of race is discrimination on the basis of race, regardless of what your race is. But ultimately, it tells employers that consistent review, evaluation, reevaluation, and application of otherwise neutral policies, practices, and procedures should serve to diminish possible disparate impact liability and diminish the likelihood, or perhaps in the Ritchie case, the need for engaging in other forms of discrimination. I like that case because it's interesting. It does stir a lot of emotions. On the other hand, it's not going to have a tremendous impact across the country, except with respect to a lot of the municipal areas where tests and paper and pencil tests are involved. But again, it does tell all employers, be careful about your paper and pencil tests and how you try to avoid disparate impact liability. Another case that was important this year is the 14 Penn Plaza versus Payette case. And in that particular situation, an agreement between a union and an employer, a group of unions and employer, was set out in a collective bargaining agreement, and that required union members to submit all claims of employment discrimination to binding arbitration. Sometime after that, the city went ahead and hired temporary workers, people who are not part of the collective bargaining arrangement. And the employees filed grievances with the union claiming, among a number of things, age discrimination. In this particular case, the union had consented to the contract, and so because of that, did not pursue the discrimination grievances on behalf